A child who struggles to read can quickly fall behind in school. Nearly every academic area includes some reading, and children might become confused or frustrated when they don't understand. Behavior challenges can result, and sometimes schools and parents struggle to know why a student is having a hard time. In this training, we'll talk about 2 ways schools can support students with learning disabilities. One way is through assistive technology, text to speech, speech to text, and Audible books can provide a student with access to literature and interesting topics that other students their age are learning about. These assistive technologies can be listed as accommodations on a student's individualized education program, their IEP, or on a Section 504 plan. Students receiving special education services also can get literacy support with specially designed instruction, shortened to SDI. We'll talk about how IEP goals can include more than one level of learning when the student's program blends specially designed instruction and goal setting with text-to-speech accommodations. When IEP goals and accommodations work together, a student's progress accelerates. Let's talk through some important vocabulary. Dyslexia is a disability condition that impacts reading. Other related learning disabilities are dysgraphia, a learning disability in writing, and dyscalculia, a learning disability in math. These conditions all relate to literacy, which is how we read, write, and use communication. Laws that protect students with disabilities don't use these labels explicitly. Instead, they include these conditions under a broad term called specific learning disability. Over the years, there has been some confusion about use of these terms in schools. That confusion was part of a family's due process complaint against a school district in Washington state. In February 2022, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a decision. The court said schools are not required to name a student's learning disability dyslexia. Schools can meet federal and state standards by identifying a student as having a specific learning disability. The U.S. Department of Education, on the other hand, has issued guidance stating that although schools don't have to use the terms dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia, there is nothing that prevents their use. So here's a tip for families. You can talk about your student as having a specific learning disability with characteristics or features of dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, or more than one. Evidence-based instruction from properly trained teachers and appropriate accommodations are required, regardless of what everyone calls the disability. A student who struggles with literacy might be supported by a Section 504 plan or an individualized education program, an IEP. Eligibility for either is determined through an educational evaluation. The first question is always, does the student have a disability? A school district's evaluation can determine the answer by doing a variety of assessments and reviewing the student's records. If there is a disability, then the school district determines whether the condition is having a significant impact on the student's ability to learn and participate in school. If both answers are yes, then the student is protected in their right to get support at school. A Section 504 plan or an IEP can provide accommodations. The term text-to-speech captures a variety of accommodations that we're going to talk about in this training. Text-to-speech can be an element in a 504 plan or an IEP. If the student's disability is impacting their education to the extent that they need to be taught differently, then an IEP is the appropriate tool to serve the needs. Uniquely designed instruction is formally called specially designed instruction, or SDI. The need for SDI is what makes a student eligible for an IEP. It's the school's responsibility to make sure their SDI is working and that the student is making adequate progress on IEP goals and in their grade level curriculum. Let's look a little further at what the school is responsible to do. Students with learning disabilities generally don't learn in the standard way. They need instructions provided differently. Specific learning disability is a category of eligibility for an IEP. An eligible student is entitled to specially designed instruction, SDI. They get SDI to help them catch up to the literacy level of their classmates. Here's a quote from the Revised Codes of Washington, specifically RCW 28A 320260, which describes what schools are supposed to do when a student has a specific learning disability. The interventions must be evidence-based, multisensory, structured literacy interventions, and must be provided by an educator trained in instructional methods specifically targeting students' areas of weakness. Here's a tip. Parents can ask for detail about how teachers are trained to use evidence-based, multisensory structured literacy interventions. Ask if there's a reading specialist in the district who might help the student, and train other teachers who work with the student in any space where reading is part of schoolwork. The IEP can document teacher training as consultation. In addition to the SDI that supports literacy, students with specific learning disabilities have a right to individualized accommodations. OSPI provides a handout called Best Practices for Supporting Grades 3 and Above. Included is a list of evidence-based classroom strategies, social-emotional supports, and guidance about how to accommodate a struggling reader at school. The top recommendations suggest that schools, 1, use audiobooks to support access to grade level curriculum, and 2, allow assistive technology. Here are examples of what assistive technology might be: audio versions of learning materials, devices that translate what the student says into words on a page, computers that read to you, and other applications that help with spelling and note-taking. For the purposes of this training, we're going to lump all those various technologies into what we're calling text-to-speech. Schools are responsible to help students access grade level material to the maximum extent possible. Washington follows Common Core standards. The learning standards for literacy go beyond the skill of just saying or thinking what the words on the page say. Here's a way to understand what this means. I'm going to read the Common Core standard written on this slide. While you listen, think about how a student who struggles to read with their eyes might get closer to these aspirations if they can read with their ears. The Common Core asks students to read stories and literature, as well as more complex texts that provide facts and background knowledge in areas such as science and social studies. Students will be challenged and asked questions that push them to refer back to what they've read. This stresses critical thinking, problem solving, and analytical skills that are required for success in college, career, and life. Here's a tip for families. You can talk about how critical thinking, problem solving, and analytical skills are being taught and reinforced throughout the student's education, including through work that requires reading with eyes on the page and or ears tuned to an audible format. Keep in mind that Common Core standards apply to all students, including those who receive services through an individualized education program, an IEP, and those who are accommodated through a Section 504 plan. A student's services are designed to help them access learning at an appropriate age, grade, and developmental level. Here is an important point to remember. A services program is not the student's education. The services are designed to help the student access their education. School-based services are supposed to provide FAPE. That stands for Free, Appropriate Public Education. Families reaching out to Pave often want us to answer this question. What does the school have to do? The answer is FAPE. A school is responsible to serve a student with a disability with an education that is reasonably calculated to ensure that they can make progress appropriate in light of their disability condition. That's FAPE. A school is responsible to do everything reasonable to help the student catch up with their classmates. That's also FAPE. If FAPE were a car, it would not be a Cadillac or a Tesla. It would be a fully functional vehicle that would reliably get you where you need to go. If FAPE were soup, it would need some carefully chosen ingredients. The rest of this training is going to focus on two important ones, the ones that make the secret sauce for a student struggling with literacy. Specially designed instruction, SDI, for student level learning, and text-to-speech for grade level learning. Here's a bit more about FAPE. Remember we talked about the Common Core standards and how they apply to all students? The Common Core is part of general education, and general education is the least restrictive environment. Schools are responsible to serve students with FAPE in the least restrictive environment to the maximum extent possible. Providing accommodations through text-to-speech can be part of a school's recipe for serving FAPE while meeting LRE requirements and moving the student toward Common Core standards. Think about least restrictive environment, LRE, and what text-to-speech technology might mean for a child in school. What makes school exciting and engaging? Imagine slogging through the same primary books year after year while classmates down the hall are moving on to learn about how molecules get built, how air balloons take flight, how maps are drawn, or something else super interesting. The core curriculum includes knowledge and learning in a vast world of subject areas. Learning to read with eyes and ears can unlock access to those subjects and can help the student get back to class in their regular room. In that way, text-to-speech supports access to FAPE in the least restrictive environment. Remember that FAPE and LRE are foundational rights for students with disabilities. Considering the vocabulary we just reviewed, here's a topic for schools and families to meet and discuss. How can text-to-speech support access to general education spaces and the core curriculum? Remember that for the purposes of this training, we're using the term text-to-speech to capture a variety of options for supporting students. A computer that reads to you or a computer that translates what you say into words are options. Audible books are also options. All of those are accommodations that might be included in a student's IEP or Section 504 plan. The IEP or 504 plan also might include modifications, which are changes to the way the student shows what they know. Schools and families can talk about clever ways to modify work for students who struggle with literacy. For example, a student might record a video or build an audio-visual presentation instead of completing a term paper. Another way students might access text-to-speech is through Universal Design for Learning, which is shortened to UDL. UDL means that teaching and learning adapt to support diverse learners, regardless of who in the class receives special education services. Mixed medium learning and assignments are normalized in many schools around the country. It's worth asking your school whether universal design concepts are coming into classrooms. Universal Design for Learning supports access to core learning for all students. You might notice that the Revised Code of Washington, specifically RCW 320.260, requires schools to support literacy with multi-tiered programming. That means schools provide different levels of help for all students who need it, regardless of special education eligibility. Students who have IEPs can work on goals that incorporate concepts from universal design or specific accommodations or modifications that are part of their program. This slide lists two potential IEP goals. Take a look. Which one of them do you believe supports inclusion in grade level learning? I'll read the two sample goals and you can think about it. Choice A. When given a general education text that is read aloud, student will recall key details from the story: who, what, when, where, and why questions, improving reading comprehension from 0 to 80% of opportunities. Here's choice B for an IEP goal. When given a text at their reading level, student will sound out the words, improving decoding and comprehension skills to answer who, what, when, where, and why questions from 0 to 80% of opportunities. Choice A is what I was looking for because choice A incorporates text-to-speech technology. The support makes it possible for the student to enjoy and understand a book as they work on their reading comprehension skills with their class. Yes, A is the answer I was looking for. Notice that goal B on this slide requires the student to work on their decoding, their reading, at the same time they're working on comprehension. It's really two goals smashed together. Only having this goal might hold a student back. They might be capable of understanding a story that they listen to at a different level than they can read the words from the page. This is a good time to consider a very common accommodation that might work well, or it might be missing its mark: more time. It's easy to suggest that a student who struggles to read or write might need more time than other students to get their work done. For some students, this is true. For others, it can backfire. Consider what it might feel like to have all the time in the world to finish something while new work piles up. Would the workload start to feel overwhelming? Stacked deadlines and overwhelm can be reasons that students quit school. What if the expectation and the support were altered instead? What if assignments were modified to make them more doable? What if text-to-speech makes the work more approachable in a reasonable amount of time? It's important to remember that accommodations and modifications need to be individualized. We've been talking about use of text-to-speech to accommodate a student at school, and you might be wondering, does my child still work on their reading and writing? The answer is, of course. Accommodations are only part of a student's services. Remember that specially designed instruction, SDI, is what a student with an IEP has the right to receive to help them make appropriate progress in skill areas that are lagging because of their disability. Here are two sample IEP goals to help us consider what might best support student-level progress in reading. I'll read the two goals out loud to give you time to think about your first choice. Here's choice A. When reading independently in class, student will complete answers about written content, improving comprehension from 0 to 5 to 4 out of 5 opportunities. Here's choice B. When given a reading passage with words that have multiple syllables, student will use pre-taught strategies to chunk the words by syllable and sound out the words, improving their ability to decode from 0 to 5 to 4 out of 5 opportunities. If you chose B, you are starting to understand how to write solid IEP goals to support student-level learning. Notice the word pre-taught is embedded within the goal. That means the student is being asked to apply learning that the teacher is providing. There's a little bit about that learning strategy built into the goal, the chunking and the sounding out of words. Those are aspects of a teacher's specially designed instruction, the SDI. Remember that a goal is used to chart progress toward learning in a subject area. The goal is not the child's curriculum. We've talked about how text-to-speech might accommodate a student in learning at their grade level, while specially designed instruction SDI supports learning at the student's level of literacy. This is how we get to that secret sauce that we talked about earlier. A student's services can support all of it. This same formula can apply to any specific learning disability with characteristics of dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, or something else. Keep in mind that reading isn't only about decoding words. Reading is also about the theme, plot, character development, and so on. Those skills are related to the Common Core standards for literacy. Similarly, writing is not just putting pencil to paper, but is also about figuring out how to express and organize an idea so that others can understand your point or your request. We can talk about math here too. Math concepts can be expressed and understood using numbers on a page, manipulatives, or verbally. Cleverly combining SDI, that specially designed instruction and goal setting, with accommodations and modifications may give a student their best shot at accelerated learning. I want to make an important point about what text-to-speech can include. Some tablets and computers are outfitted with screen readers so that a computer-generated voice reads the words that are on the screen. This technology is helpful in some instances, but isn't the only option that schools can choose. There are companies that produce a huge range of audible books, textbooks, and curricula. These audible texts are often read by actors and professional readers who are easy and fun to listen to. This slide includes a screenshot of one agency that records books for schools. It's called Bookshare. Be sure to ask the school what subscription service their district has for audible formats. Washington State requires screenings and interventions for dyslexia. Lawmakers in 2018 passed Senate Bill 6162 to require schools to screen young children for the indicators of weaknesses associated with dyslexia and support literacy across all grades. The law took effect in the 21-22 school year. Remember that the school might not use the term dyslexia. They will be looking for features or characteristics of a specific learning disability. Appropriate literacy support for all grades is part of the initiative. Washington State Educational Agency is the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, OSPI for short. OSPI provides a library of screening tools and best practices. The OSPI website page pictured on this slide is called Screening Tools and Best Practices. Included on the page are resources and fact sheets for families and caregivers in multiple languages. Notice that OSPI's website is k12.wa.us. I hope this training has provided information to support your journey toward better school services for a student with a learning disability. For help with specific questions, families are welcome to contact us at the Parent Training and Information Program of Pave. Students, family members, and professionals can get no-cost direct assistance by going to our website, wapave.org, and clicking Get Help. We provide language translation options. You can also leave a message by phone to request help, 800-572-7368. If you need help with the accessibility of any of our resources, please let us know. Please note that Pave is not a legal service organization and can't give you legal advice or represent you. PTI's funding comes from a U.S. Department of Education grant, but the U.S. government doesn't review our training materials in order to endorse them. We'd love to know whether this video was helpful for you. On a page where you found this video, there's a link to a short survey. Thank you for sharing your feedback. Thank you also for listening and learning, and please contact us at wapave.org for individualized assistance or further training opportunities.